what's amazing about trauma is that it remains available to be healed. And we can tell that it's available to be healed because we can still feel it in our bodies.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 426 with guest Sarah Peyton. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you're here, and I am still excited about this change that I've made to the podcast, where we are doing themes and talking about specific topics for a period of time. This first one is all about healing. I'm asking the majority of my guests, full disclosure, there was a couple of guests that I recorded their interviews like late in 2021, and I didn't know yet that I was going to ask them all a question. Please forgive. But I'm asking most of the experts that I'm having on this question: how do we heal? There are so many different modalities, so many different paths that we can go down, which I'm so glad, because one thing might work for you, but it might not work for the next person. I have a lot of different experts on talking about these different modalities, and that's no exception with who we have today. Sarah Peyton's on, and I can't wait for you to listen to her voice. She's so soothing and so comforting, and I want her to read me bedtime stories forever, for the rest of my life. But before we jump into that, I wanted to remind you about the retreat that is going to be happening as I'm recording this intro, which is a little bit early because we are most likely going to lose power in the next few days. It legitimately is supposed to be like snowpocalypse. We're getting 8 inches in a day, which is a lot for us. We're not prepared for that. But as of now, I don't have a date yet, but I'm for sure going to host a Daring Way retreat this year. It is going to be in Asheville, North Carolina. And the information page that tells you most of the logistics as well as the price range that it's going to be is at andreaowen.com/retreat. So if you think you might be interested, go ahead and sign up there, because these are the people I'm going to email first when we open up registration. The last couple times I've done this, the first time I did it, it sold out in an hour, and then it's sold out every time after that. So if you think you want to go over and read about it. If it sounds great, sign up. You'll be the first to know. I'm also considering doing a special one just for people in recovery. So you'll just check the box. You'll see that on the little sign up thingamadoodle. And I can't wait. All right. Let me tell you about Sarah. Oh, I can't wait for you guys to hear. I wish I could just dump all the podcast episodes at the same time, because they're all so good. They're all so good. All right. Sarah Peyton, author, constellations facilitator, certified nonviolent communication trainer, and neuroscience educator, integrates constellations, brain science, and the use of resonant language to heal trauma with exquisite and warm gentleness. She teaches and lectures internationally and is the author of the Your Resonant Self books on the relational neuroscience of making your brain a good place to live. Her 3rd book, Affirmations for Turbulent Times, is now available. So without further ado, here is Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for being here today.
Andrea, what a pleasure.
I am so excited to talk to you. I am lucky enough to be kind of batching these interviews. And so I've been spending the entire day talking. I'm probably going to need a nap or go to bed very early from these big conversations about just deeper work. And I would love to start by asking you, like, I always just kind of dive into the deep end. I'm always curious about how people came to this work. Like, did you always know you wanted to do this, like from a young age, or did you kind of stumble upon it? How did you get here?
It was really, there's a bit of a sadness to this story, but there's also some beauty to this story. I had an adopted son, and he had a ton of trauma when he was a little guy that had happened before he came to us. and we were trying to figure out how the heck to basically save him from the trauma. We did not actually end up saving him. He actually died of alcoholism when he was in his 30s.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. But the experience of, I said the other day, and it just feels so true to me, that trauma can take people away from us, but trauma can't take the relationship away from us. Like, we can lose people to death, we can lose people to trauma, but it doesn't stop us from loving them. So that's really where this all came from for me, was this longing to be able to interrupt and change the trajectory of trauma, which now often happens for people who are working with the material that I teach. But some people, of course, we don't get to keep them with us, even though we want to.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it sounds like it's such a paradox. Like, both things can be true. The pain of trauma can exist, and we can still love the person, whether or not they're still here, or whether or not we have a relationship with them anymore.
Yeah. And certainly it's a very interesting thing to have a deep and loving relationship with somebody as they're, and being able to see clearly, like really being able to see clearly, that's trauma.
Yeah.
This person's not trying to hurt me. This person is not, they're not trying to injure me. They are just acting out of their trauma, and I get to love the heck out of them. It's really radical. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a therapist recently, and we were doing trauma work together, and she sort of offhandedly said it, but it was one of those things that struck me, and I wrote it down, and I'm misquoting her, but it was something to the extent of, we're all just human beings acting from our subconscious.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, isn't that the truth? For me, it helped me have compassion for other people. Not that, boundaries still need to take place, but it's a different perspective. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's very different.
One of the, I was poking around on your website, and you have an online course about this, and it made me so curious. And it sounds like it's a technique that you use in your work, and you call it a time travel process to make empathy guesses for your younger self. So can you talk to us about what is that approach like, and how can it be used to help someone work through kind of generational trauma?
Yeah, such beautiful questions. What's amazing about trauma is that it remains available to be healed. And we can tell that it's available to be healed because we can still feel it in our bodies.
Sure likes to stick around, doesn't it? Until you pay attention.
That's right. But that aliveness in our bodies lets us know that the amygdala is right there. And the amygdala, which is this funny little organ deep inside the brain that holds on to trauma memory, it doesn't have any sense of time. So, for example, if we lived through something in our childhood, we had a difficult time with somebody who had a particular aftershave, and we're, in our 40s, 50s, walking down the street, and somebody walks by with that aftershave, and our heart starts beating fast, and we want to hide, and we're like, wow, that was intense. That's, basically PTSD. That's the experience of trauma, letting us know that there were moments in our childhood or in our young adulthood that were difficult, where we weren't accompanied, and that we need accompaniment. So we get to actually time travel once we realize this. And Ruth Lanius, who is an amazing neuroscientist who studies trauma and the treatment of trauma and how to heal trauma, she did a series of case studies with a number of people who did time travel. And what she discovered was that before the time travel, she could visually see trauma in the brain. We can see when people have post-traumatic stress. So Ruth Lanius took people who were who had post-traumatic stress disorder and had symptoms. And when she looked at their brains, what's called the default mode network, she could tell in a way that they were attacking themselves. And that's one of the after effects of trauma, is that we're really quite cruel to ourselves. And so she took a picture of their brains before they did time travel, and then she took a picture of their brains after they did time travel, which is the experience of really taking it seriously, stepping through time and space, catching our younger self, making sure we really understand what kinds of feelings our younger self had.
Yeah.
That's where we'll get kind of traffic jams, is if we don't even realize there was disgust. But then we get to name it. We go, yeah, there was disgust. And our body and the memory starts to relax. The amygdala starts to relax. And then we can say, do you want to come home with me? You've been alone in this memory for too long. I wonder if you want to come home with me. And then we kind of gather our past selves up and bring them through time and space to present time. Mm-hmm. And when we do this, what Ruth Lanius saw was that the PTSD marks disappear in the brain. So this is quite an extraordinary thing we can do.
Okay. Yeah. So when you say time travel, do you mean, is that done through hypnosis or hypnotherapy? What is that actually look like?
It doesn't need anything in particular. It can be a journaling moment.
Oh, it could even be like talk therapy.
Yeah.
Okay.
All that needs to happen is that we have some warm curiosity about the physical experience of the past self and what emotions our past self might have had.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's all we need. And it works great people do it in hypnotherapy all the time, and it's wonderful. People do it with EMDR, and it's wonderful. People do it with imagining enormous and beautiful animals like huge black panthers that time travel to come and rescue us from past events. People do all kinds of time travel, and they're all effective. But the most important thing is what's happening with the body of the past self in the memory. And as we name emotions, does that body begin to relax? And when it relaxes, do we get to bring it home?
Yeah.
So that we're no longer stuck in the past. And people reclaim all kinds of life energy from doing this work. It's like,
I'm so intrigued. I'm like taking a note to look at that afterwards when we're done talking. I'm sure there's people listening who are going to look into it as well. Yeah. It's so fast. And I love looking when experts talk about the more, it's kind of called woo-woo in this industry, the more kind of abstract modalities to heal, as well as science-based evidence like brain scans and things like that. So I love talking about that. But it makes me want to ask you about epigenetics. And for people who aren't sure what that term is, can you briefly talk about what that is and how does epigenetics reveal itself in our lives? And I think I'm just going to leave it at that because that could go in any direction. I'm interested in what you have to say.
Such a great question.
We don't mess around here, Sarah.
No, we don't. We're right on it. I want to say that on the website, there's a first aid for trauma down. It's like a little class that walks you through the whole time travel process.
Oh, good. We'll link to that in the show notes. So it's easy for people to check out. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN, in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC.
But epigenetics is the study of how past generations' experience affects present generations' experience. And it includes all kinds of things. It includes like the effects of famine and how people have more or less tendency to be diabetic based on what happened to their great-grandparents in times of feast or famine.
Wow.
So we are much more a part of our family line than we ever get any information that we are in modern day life. But I have an epigeneticist that I just love who works in Montreal, whose name is Moshe Zhyf, Szyf. And what he did is he said, I wonder if we had a big event, a big stressful event that happened to a whole bunch of people, I wonder if that event would show up on the protein sheath around the DNA. And the protein sheath around human DNA is a little like tree rings. You know, when you cut down a tree and you see, oh, here was a really rich summer with lots of water. Here was a really dry summer. Well, we can do that with the ways that the markings are on our protein sheath around our DNA. So he took a particular weather event in Quebec, which was the Quebec ice storm, where for 3 months, the people of Quebec were just completely in isolation. The buses were frozen to the ground with 1.5 thick sheets of ice. The ice formed on the electrical conduits, and all of the electricity in the town went out. There were no buses. There were no taxis. There were no, it was hard to get grocery stores open. People were just banding together as best they could anywhere where they could survive, anywhere that had a fireplace, and just trying to keep each other alive. And many people died, but it was quite a big stressful event in that city. And so he said, I wonder if I can see the Quebec ice storm in people's epigenetic sheath. And it turned out he could. And as a result of that, he said, I think that in the next 40 years, we're going to be able to read the impact of human historical trauma on families. Like, we would be able to take your DNA and the protein sheath around it, and Moshe Zhyf would be able to look at it, and he'd be able to say, oh, look at this. Your family suffered during the Inquisition in Spain in the 1500s. And you would be going, what?
Wow. It's like a crystal ball.
Yeah, it's quite intensely beautiful that we are such a part of our history. We often think of ourselves as being independent and that we create our own lives. But there's so much that comes from our family experience and has such a strong impact on our health and well-being. So then the next question might very well be, how do we heal that?
Yeah. It's a big task. I hadn't heard about that particular study, but I know there's been a handful of them. The one I read about very briefly, and please forgive my layman's terms of explaining this, but it was someone had studied the offspring of men who had served in the Civil War here in the United States.
Yes.
And I believe that they tested them. They looked at the offspring's DNA before these men fought in the war and then after, and noticed a marked difference.
Right.
That made me sit up and pay attention to epigenetics.
Yes, no kidding. And they've done this with survivors of Auschwitz. They've done this with with people who are Native American, indigenous peoples of North America. They've done this with folks who have served in the military. And one of the major ways that we get affected by past stress is our tendency to be hyper responsive to stress. So the more that our ancestors had to live in really stressful times, the more our little bodies get alarmed by stress and are hyper reactive to it. And one of the ways we get to move towards healing, it's such a beautiful thing, is with meditations and self-connection that touches into the needs and the longings that are most important to us. When we touch into, this is the work of Herbert Benson at Harvard, at the offshoot of Harvard. What he discovered is that when we allow ourselves time every day, I think it's 8 minutes a day, to just sink into what our beautiful needs and longings are, what our deep values are, what makes us who we are, that it actually specifically relaxes us and transforms that hyperactive stress response. So we're not powerless here in our relationship with the historic past.
You're not powerless. I love that last part too, that there's, hope for healing in that. And I believe so much in the science of epigenetics. And I think about, for some reason, I'm very fascinated with my maternal line.
Oh.
It fascinates me to no end that for how many thousands of years that these women who knows what they have survived long enough through childbirth to bear a daughter for so many generations. And then what's also very interesting is when I learned many years ago that the egg that made me was existing in my maternal grandmother, who is a woman who I never got a chance to meet. She passed away about 12 years before I was born. And I've just heard stories, she had 11 children, one of which was hit by a drunk driver. He was 7 years old and she had to grieve that loss. She also had a child, pass away of SIDS. And I think about that, you can't tell me that doesn't in at least some way carry through in our DNA. Right. And, my mom had an awful, it's 2 or so years before I was born. There was if anyone's probably my age, you might've heard about the Dalkin Shield lawsuit. It was an IUD that was like the newest and best birth control, and it failed miserably many women. And my mom was part of that and had a horrible, horrible miscarriage. Oh. And I feel that. Like, I can't tell the story or hear about it without feeling a somatic response. And so I know without a doubt that they were all walking around with the passed down traumas of our ancestors, many of which had never even gotten any support for it.
Right. There was no support, was there?
No. And it's one of the reasons I think I'm drawn to this work and talking about people who can help and are experts in so many different modalities. I want to switch gears for a minute here because the topic around attachment styles is sort of like the topic du jour, which I love. It's all over social media, if you didn't know, but I think it's great, people kind of seeing themselves in different attachment styles. So can you talk to us about what is a disorganized attachment style?
Oh, this is wonderful stuff. So it turns out that the way that our parents were raised and the way that they treat themselves and the way that they talk to themselves and the way that they talk about their childhood shows up both in their language and in the way that they treat us. For example, if somebody had a traumatic childhood, then when they talk about their childhood, their grammar is disrupted. They might say, oh, my father hit a car there, drove over, broken legs. It's just like the very capacity to create grammar is changed by trauma. And the way that a person can be with their children is changed by trauma. So the disorganized attachment is the transmission over time of experiences of trauma in the very closest relationships that we have, our attachment relationships, and the ways that trauma makes people unpredictable, and then how we internalize that and then expect that. So if my dad had disorganized attachment, then there were ways that he was unpredictable in relationship with me that I then carry through into my relationship with my child, where I'm unpredictable in the same way, sudden rages or dissociation, or a sudden, like, complete, like almost dissociation, like a complete disappearance, a stopping answering questions, all of these things that parents do habitually can leave a mark on us. Mm-hmm. And the most profound one, I often have people do this in classes for disorganized attachment, is if a child is distressed and the mother smiles at the child or looks puzzled that the child is distressed, this is a key precursor to later disorganized attachment. It's like there's some way that as mammals we need to be understood. And when we're not understood, or our distress is not understood, then what happens is we get disrupted in very foundational ways that are profound and strangely huge for such a little thing as a mom looking at us in disbelief or incomprehension when we're crying. Isn't that a strange thing that they've discovered?
I am having so many aha moments when you're saying that. I don't have a response because I was listening so intently. Wow. But my short answer is yes. Yes, it's so fascinating. And the one thing that kind of popped up for me is I had a thought that, and I don't know how right or wrong or whatever this is, but it sounds like human mammals, we want to be seen in our humanity, even as very young children.
Yes, we need to make sense to each other. Yes. And the beautiful research about disorganized attachment and traumatic attachment, the same thing, is that grandparents can be very strong remedies for disorganized attachment. So if we know, for example, that there's a lot of trauma happening in our grandchild's life in relationship with their parent, the more stable, present, responsive, warm we are, we don't have to save the child. We don't have to get the child out of the difficult situation. All we have to do is just be our loving selves, and it actually will change the child's propensity to transmit disorganized attachment to the next generation. It's quite a thing. Relationship is the most beautiful thing we have.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Fast forward to the end of 2024 and think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If you want to learn a new language, you absolutely should get Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Now it's so easy to speak simple conversation phrases with the guy that takes care of my lawn without having to consult language apps. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/noise. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/noise, spelled BABBEL.com/noise. Rules and restrictions may apply. It's hard to find a great mentor who can help me level up. My dream mentor, Shonda Rhimes. So I was really excited when I heard she has a class on Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 plus of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. I'm always looking for ways to be a better writer, so I took Shonda Rhimes' screenwriting class. It helped me gain concrete technical advice, including structuring, the writing process, and with shows under her belt like Grey's Anatomy and Bridgerton, it was so helpful. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/Andrea. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/Andrea. Masterclass.com/Andrea. Okay, switching gears again, because there's so many different topics I want to ask you about. In your opinion, what do you think stops us from easy self-expression?
Well, often I think we're stopped from self-expression by both past experiences of trauma where we were ridiculed or humiliated, or by promises we made ourselves not to express, often in order to keep from being humiliated or ridiculed. Expression and shame are hugely linked for humans. It's like a question of whether we can both be ourselves and belong is always the question at every moment, I think, for every human being.
Yes, I'm seeing parts of myself in what you just said, and how I had another woman I was interviewing, and I was telling her about a recent therapist of mine who was complimenting my personality and that I'm so enthusiastic and cheerful. And she said, you're quite the entertainer, because I'm funny. And it was sort of like, my child, it's always been my role, quote unquote, and I've been praised for it. And she asked me, we were doing some deep work, and she asked me, like, what would happen if you didn't have that, and sort of asking me, am I using it? Yes, it's part of my personality. And do I use it many times as a mask to protect myself from pain, from dealing with the shame and trauma that I've had? And let me tell you what, Sarah, when she asked me that, it even makes my stomach hurt to tell the story. So she definitely hit a nerve. And I think the thing that what I like to just kind of say what's there and just say out loud, what is hard for me in doing this career as someone who has a podcast with hundreds of episodes and people really know me, or they think they know me. I write books and I'm on social media. I think the thing that I struggle with is, in forms of self-expression, is showing people all the sides of me. It's almost like a peacock where there's so many different facets of humans, of all humans. And I worry, I still have this worry, like this voice that says, do not show people the most broken parts of you, because they will go away. Yeah. And that's actually what happens in attachment. That takes us right back to attachment. There are all kinds of sort of little workarounds for our children having emotions that are part of attachment styles and attachment patterns. And one of the things that avoidantly attached parents tend to do is they tend to turn away remember how with disorganized attachment, the mother was surprised when the child was crying. In avoidant attachment, the mother just turns away when the child is crying. Yeah, that was my experience. Yeah. And also when the child is joyful, the parent turns away. It's like, that's not the important stuff. The important stuff is getting things done. That's the avoidant attachment motto, is get things done. Feelings don't solve problems. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Family motto. I love that as a motto for avoidant attachment. If we have an idea like you have, that we should not reveal either the depths of our sorrow or shame or the heights of our ecstasy or joy, we're probably doing this on very good historical evidence that our mothers actually did turn away from those kinds of emotions. Our bodies know it. It's a truth. And we get to that's one of the things we get to do with the unconscious contract process, which is book 2, the Your Resonant Self Workbook. It's all about these unconscious contracts we make with ourselves, because attachment's all well and good, but what the heck do we do with it now? Yeah.
Like, we don't want to necessarily hide our sorrow if we're doing podcasts, because sorrow is of huge importance and everybody shares sorrow. And there are ways to talk about it that invite people into mourning and let the world heal. So it's of huge importance. So maybe this is a contract we want to let go of, to some extent, or partly let go of.
I love that. Thank you. And I think, now that I think about it, my father passed away in 2016. I brought people with me. I turned on the microphone and talked about my grief. He was the first person I lost through death that I was that close to. I hadn't lost anyone before him. And so I don't even remember those podcast episodes. It was several years ago, but I was crying. I remember that. But
I'm sure it was immensely healing for your people.
The listeners. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did get some feedback that people were grateful, who had either recently lost a parent or even years before lost a parent, who were saying that they felt truly seen. I just love the sound of your voice. So I'm sure I'm not the first person that's told you that. You have I just want to acknowledge like how soothing and comforting. And you could be reading your grocery list to us and I would feel nurtured and held. So thank you for that. And we are for sure going to put the links in the show notes to your programs and your book. I know that you have Your Resonant Self. Is there more than one book, or is it just
there are three? There are three. There's the Your Resonant Self book, and there's the Your Resonant Self workbook for those who are interested in those contracts. And there's also a book of affirmations.
Yes, affirmations for turbulent times, correct?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we'll link to that. I'm asking all of the guests, as we're on this theme around healing, and in your opinion, can you tell us? For some, it's a whopper of a question, but I'm very curious about your answer around the question: how do we heal ourselves?
With warmth and warm curiosity, and by turning toward ourselves, which sounds like it might be simple, but is not at all simple, because it's never really modeled. We don't see some public figure who suddenly makes a mistake and goes, "Oh, dang, Dan, are you sad that you just..."
God, can you imagine the uproar?
So it's not modeled, but we need to learn it because it heals us. Yeah, the turning towards the self.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know that people have gotten so much out of this. And do you have, I want people to know, because I know that they're going to want to know, do you have any programs that are starting soon? Should everyone just go to your website? Do you have anything that you want to?
Yes. We have two things that started last week that are just very, very easy to join. One is in a daily affirmations lab. Well, it's not daily, but it's weekly. A little moment of doing affirmations before the beginning of the day, once or twice a week. And then we're also doing a wonderful class on the shadow and what happens when we look at pettiness or contempt with these eyes of resonance. How do we begin to change ourselves and change the world? So those two things are happening. And then in March, the free Resonance Summit is coming up. So sign up for the mailing list, and then you'll be able to hear people like Daniel Siegel and the woman who developed emotionally focused therapy, Sue Johnston, and able to hear many people who practice the time travel. It's all very, very cool and fun and healing.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Okay, we'll have those links in the show notes. Thank you again for being here and giving us your time. And listeners, thank you so much for your time. You know how valuable I think it is. And I just am honored that you choose to spend it here with me and my guests. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now, everyone. Hi there. Swinging back by to say one more thing. You know how I'm always giving advice over here on the show and on social media. And a couple of those things is that I'm always telling you to ask for what you want, be clear about it, and also ask for help. So I am taking a dose of my own medicine, and I'm going to do that right now. It would be the absolute best and mean the world to me if you reviewed and subscribed to this show, Make Some Noise podcast, on whatever podcast platform of your choice. And even more importantly, It would matter so much if you shared this show. Sharing the show is one of the few ways the podcast can grow, and that also gives more women an opportunity to make some noise in their lives. You can do that by taking a screenshot when you're listening on your phone and sharing it in your Instagram or Facebook stories. If you're on Instagram, you can tag me at Hey Andrea Owen, and I try my best to always re-share those and give you a quick thank you DM. And also you can tell your friends and family about it. Tell them what you learned, tell them a really awesome guest that you found on the show that you started following. Whatever it is, I appreciate so much you sharing about this show.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.